Tonight on Steelers Talk, I'm going to tell you why I believe the Pittsburgh Steelers should be favorites in the AFC North after the conclusion of Week 4 of the 2025 NFL season. Then we'll dive into the film here. Week 4 versus the Minnesota Vikings. I've got 6 offensive takeaways from the film I want to share, and then 8 takeaways on defense that you're not going to want to miss. Make sure you guys stick around for those film takeaways. Earlier today, I broke down Jalen Ramsey and Calvin Austin III's injury news today and talking about some of the options that the Steelers have at nickel corner and wide receiver. We go over some potential trade targets at the wide receiver position. We talk about both positions and what the Steelers can do to address those positions, as it looks like the Steelers will be without Jalen Ramsey and Calvin Austin III for at least a few weeks. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already to make sure you can check out that video and every single one of our videos here on Steelers Talk and to never miss a new video that comes out. So let's start here with this. And, I think, before the season, there was a lot of people saying the Ravens were certainly going to win the AFC North. The Steelers had no chance to win this division. 4 weeks into the year, I can say right now, all right, things can certainly change, and things certainly need to continue to go in the trajectory that they're going for this to come to fruition, all right? It's still early in the season, but the Steelers are absolutely in the driver's seat right now to win the AFC North division this year and get a home playoff game in January. You take a look at where the AFC North stands right now. Pittsburgh Steelers are sitting at 3-1 right now at the top of the AFC North standings. The Bengals play tonight against the Denver Broncos. They can tie the Pittsburgh Steelers with a win this evening, but then the Baltimore Ravens fell to 1-3, and they have a bunch of injuries. We're going to talk about that here in just a second. And then, of course, the Cleveland Browns are 1-3 as well. So you take a look at some of the things that are going wrong with the other teams in the AFC North right now. The Ravens have a ton of injuries that is going to affect how they can play over the next several weeks, and they've already started 1-3, and their defense is having some major struggles right now, siphoning yards and points to start this year off. They've been a bottom 3 defense in the league. Then the Bengals also arguably have a bottom 3 defense in the league, and they don't have Joe Burrow for months at this point. Then the Browns, they have a pretty decent defense, but they have arguably the worst offense, not defense, worst offense in the NFL in the league right now. So that's certainly going to hold them back as well. So if you just look at the Pittsburgh Steelers and what they're doing right now, I think they have the most complete team in the division. You guys can take a look here at some of the injuries that the Baltimore Ravens are dealing with right now. And by the way, this is after a 1-3 start. So they're going to have to start winning some football games here, guys, to save their season, with Lamar Jackson dealing with a hamstring injury. Or you got Madubuike, who's out for the season now with a neck injury. All right, they're going to get a couple of these guys back, like Kyle Van Noy, Travis Jones are expected to be back here soon, but you're going to be losing Roquan Smith for multiple weeks, Marlon Humphrey for multiple weeks, Nate Wiggins hurt his elbow in the game against Kansas City yesterday. We still don't know what his status is. This is a Ravens team that is extremely beat up, and they've got a lot of key players injured right now. Meanwhile, you talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this team is only getting better. They just put together their best overall performance on both offense and defense versus the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings came in one of the best defenses in the league. The Steelers were super successful against Brian Flores' Vikings defense, especially on the ground. And then that defense, getting DeShon Elliott back, we're going to be talking about some of the things they did schematically. That was the best that I've seen the Steelers defense play in a very, very long time. I know it was against a banged-up O-line and Carson Wentz, their backup quarterback, but some of the things the Steelers were doing schematically makes me think that the more that this team plays together, the more that this young offensive line plays together, the more that Aaron Rodgers plays with these receivers, the more that these defensive players play with each other, this Steelers team is only going to get better as the season goes on, and they're already at the top of the standings, and they already have a 2-game lead over the Baltimore Ravens early on in the season. Now, it obviously goes without saying here, guys, and I can already hear you guys at home saying, Jack, we're only 4 weeks in. You can't, count your chickens before they hatch or whatever, right? But, and obviously the Steelers need to stay focused, and obviously they need to keep playing good football, all right? They can't, let the foot off the gas like they did last year and have a complete collapse at the end of the season. I mean, the Steelers are in the driver's seat to win the AFC North last year after a 10-3 start. They had a 2-game advantage down the stretch versus the Ravens, and then, of course, it all went to crap, all right? So the Steelers obviously need to stay healthy. They need to keep playing good football, but the fact remains, the Steelers are the best team in the AFC North through the first 4 weeks of the 2025 NFL season, and they're in the driver's seat to go ahead and get a home playoff game this year, guys, which the Steelers haven't had in a very, very long time. It's been way too long since this team has won the AFC North division. And a home playoff game, guys, means that the Steelers are going to have that home field advantage, which, of course, makes it more likely that the Steelers can win that elusive playoff game that has eluded them over the last several attempts that they have had. And why has that been? It's because the Steelers have been wild card teams, and they've had to go on the road to tough environments like Arrowhead Stadium, Baltimore, Buffalo, these really tough places to play, and come out with victories against teams that won their division and some really good quarterbacks, right? But if you have a home playoff game, you get the terrible towels flying, you got Renegade blaring, that's going to increase the chances that Mike Tomlin and this Steelers team is finally going to be the team that delivers at least one playoff victory for this fan base. And frankly, it's been far too long since they've delivered that, so they got to get it done. So predict it for me down there in the comments section. Will the Pittsburgh Steelers win the AFC North this year? Certainly seems like they're in the driver's seat right now, but give me a yes or a no down there in the comment section for today's pinned question. Just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today at PrizePicks, and while I tell you about PrizePicks, simply give me yes or no down there in the comment section. And with that, let's have a word from our sponsor today at PrizePicks, and you and I, we both make decisions every single day, but on PrizePicks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. Football season is finally here, and you better believe I'll be getting my PrizePicks lineups in all season long, including for Monday Night Football tonight with the doubleheader that's going on. PrizePicks is simple to play. You just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and if you get your picks right, you could cash in. PrizePicks also puts their users first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. PrizePicks also offers Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. And a new feature from PrizePicks that I absolutely love is injury reboots. If one of your players leaves the game in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks will not count it as a loss. Let's take a look at this Bengals-Broncos matchup here on Monday Night Football. I'm taking the more there on passing yards for Bo Nix, the more on Chase Brown rushing yards, and the less on Jake Browning passing yards. You guys can get your play in right now. Go download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup on the PrizePicks app today. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup on the PrizePicks app today. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. All right, so now let's get into the film here. My takeaways after watching the film today, Steelers versus Vikings, a lot of positivity to take away from this football game, guys. And we're going to start with the offensive side of the ball here, all right? I got fewer takeaways for the offense than I do the defense, but something that was really great to see and something that I recommended for Arthur Smith to do last week when talking about my week 4 adjustments was to run more power run schemes. And they did that this week, all right? There was almost a 50-50 split between zone and power rushes for the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. And I think what it did is it really put the Vikings run defense on guard and off balance because they didn't know if there's going to be a pulling lineman or if they're going to run power, if they're going to run outside zone or inside split zone. They really did a good job varying up their concepts. And honestly, when it came to the zone run schemes, I thought, Broderick Jones, Troy Fautanu, this entire group did the best that they have done all season long at executing their assignments and doing things the right way. So I really liked the run game, curated by Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator. I thought it was fantastic. It was much more balanced, and the Steelers really did a great job with those power run schemes this week. Another thing that I love from Arthur Smith is he found a little bit of a solution here that I think is going to become a big part of this team's identity on the offensive side of the ball, which is jumbo looks, which includes 6 offensive linemen. And really for the Steelers, when they have Spencer Anderson and Darnell Washington out on the field, you have 7 offensive linemen out there. And the Minnesota Vikings are already kind of a lighter defensive front. They don't have really a true nose tackle. They traded their former nose tackle away, and Harrison Phillips and Javon Hargrave, as we know as Steelers fans, isn't really a true nose tackle, all right? He's not big enough. And the Steelers definitely took advantage of that size advantage, all right? They put out Spencer Anderson, I believe, 17 times where they were under center. They ran it 14 of those 17 times. And those jumbo tight end looks are just absolutely fantastic, guys. Anderson was out there technically as an eligible tight end, but really he was just out there as a 6th offensive lineman, and the Steelers absolutely bullied that Vikings defensive front, just like it was in our keys to victory last week. I thought it was absolutely beautiful. I think we're going to see Arthur Smith implement these way more often. And so essentially we're talking about Spencer Anderson as a big part of this Steelers offense now. And then Darnell Washington, man, what a freaking menace he is, man. Like, just watching the film, seeing him take on like a DB on the Vikings, just throw him out of the way. It's just fun to watch. It really is. And Spencer Anderson did the same thing as well. There was one rep where Spencer Anderson threw Isaiah Rodgers out of bounds. It was absolutely hilarious. The size mismatch between the Steelers' run game and the Vikings' run defense was absolutely laughable and was a big reason why the Steelers really had their way in the run game, even with their best running back out of the lineup in Jaylen Warren. Another thing that I'd recommend here is that you use Ben Skowronek more, specifically on early downs, specifically on short yardage, goal line, stuff like that. He is an awesome blocker. When they ran it to his direction, he absolutely brings the boom, and he is an unbelievable run-blocking presence. That's another kind of big body that is a problem for opposing defenses, all right? So I would certainly use him. They've certainly used him more than maybe I even expected them to use him this year, but if you want to use him even more, especially on early downs, I'm certainly not opposed to that. Then something that I was really happy to see is that they used DK Metcalf in the slot more. They didn't just run him on posts and fades and streaks. This week, they sent him out on slants. They got him the ball out in space, and of course, it culminated in that awesome 80-yard touchdown from Aaron Rodgers, and that's exactly what I've been waiting for. You guys remember last week when I talked about DK Metcalf needing to get him ahead of steam over the middle of the field, using him more like A.J. Brown, where you get him the ball over the middle of the field so he can use that yak ability, and just an awesome job from Aaron Rodgers to be able to read the coverage there, get him the football with an absolute laser in stride, so pinpoint accuracy, and then DK does the rest. Whenever he gets ahead of steam in the open field, guys, you guys saw what happened. You can't bring down that freight train. So the Steelers definitely need to get him going in the middle of the field more often. It has to be a big part of their game plans moving forward. Then we get to Aaron Rodgers, and I thought Aaron Rodgers did his job pretty darn well. And he's been doing his job all throughout the first 4 weeks of the season, all right? What the Steelers are not asking Aaron Rodgers to carry them, all right? They're not asking him to hold the ball forever, make these crazy plays out of structure. What they're asking him to do is get rid of the football, not have too many negative plays, and get the ball to the right person depending on the defensive coverage. Right now, Aaron Rodgers kind of makes sense here. He's first among starting quarterbacks in the NFL in average time to throw at 2.52 seconds average, and then he's also dead last in average depth of target. Usually, if you're getting rid of the ball faster, that means you're kind of dumping it off a little bit more. Quick game, that sort of stuff. Screens, certainly seen a lot from the Steelers offense in that regard, but that's the type of quarterback Aaron Rodgers needs to be at this point, especially playing behind maybe a little bit of a shaky pass protection unit here with the Pittsburgh Steelers. You know who else kind of fit this model? That would be Tom Brady, his final season with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was also first in the National Football League in average time to throw, and he was also dead last among starting quarterbacks in average depth of target for that season at just 7. All right, so obviously Rodgers' number is even lower than that right now, but Tom Brady was also kind of a check down king, right? He's getting the ball where it needs to go, identifying coverage pre-snap. He understands that he's not a mobile quarterback, so especially if you don't have a great pass protection unit, you have to avoid those sacks, those negative plays. Got to stay ahead of the sticks, and then when the opportunity comes and you can strike and you can throw a quick slant to DK Metcalf, or you can throw a fade route to Mike Evans, you take advantage of that opportunity. So I've been saying for months now that Aaron Rodgers needs to play the position like Tom Brady at this point in his career. He's certainly tending to that at this point in his NFL career here with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So right now, actually, the Steelers are actually first in the NFL in yards after the catch. That is a big part of DK Metcalf, obviously that 80-yard touchdown, but also DK has been one of the best yak receivers in the National Football League to start the year off. Calvin is obviously able to run with the football after the catch as well. They're doing a really good job in this department right now. And, of course, you got Jaylen Warren, who's been a big part of the passing game as well. So Rodgers is doing a good job finding the right person to get the ball to, put the ball in a place where they can run with the football so that they can get big yardage without having to throw the ball down the field. And I think Rodgers is just managing the game very beautifully right now, all right? He's not trying to do too much. He's not trying to play Superman, or at least not too much. There's been a couple instances of that and a couple turnover-worthy plays. But, for the most part, he's getting the ball out fast. fast. He's avoiding sacks. I mean, that is a great, refreshing change of pace from Justin Fields and Russell Wilson last year, who just took sack after sack after sack. Rodgers isn't doing that. He's getting the ball out fast. He's getting the ball out to the right person, depending on the coverage. He's doing a really good job, and I'm really happy he's this team's quarterback. And right now, the offense just needs to keep it up, all right? You put together a really good offensive performance. I think that you saw the offensive vision come to life there for the Pittsburgh Steelers, where you run the football very effectively, and then you, in the passing game, you play efficiently. You don't turn the football over. You take advantage of opportunities that the defense presents you pre-snap, and you play football that way. So I think that is the offensive identity here in Pittsburgh. I'm excited to see if they can continue the success after the bye week. So fill in the blank for me down there in the comment section. The Steelers have a top blank offense in the NFL right now. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. Is it top 20, top 15, top 10 even? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comments. So now we're on to the defense here, where I got 8 takeaways to share with you guys here. And I had as much fun watching this defensive film as any defensive film from the Pittsburgh Steelers that I have seen over the last several seasons. It was really a fantastic effort from the players and the coaches, scheming things up for them. And I want to start with a beautiful adjustment from Mike Tomlin and Teryl Austin. All I've been hearing on Steelers Twitter is that Mike Tomlin and Teryl Austin, they never make adjustments. Well, guess what? All they've done the last 3 weeks is make good adjustments, all right? And this week's adjustment was they went from a 5-down front, where you have 5 down linemen, where you got 2 outside linebackers, 2 defensive ends, and a nose tackle. This is what they were basing in the first 3 weeks of the season. They now have switched to a 4-down front for most of their defensive snaps. Over 91% of their defensive snaps versus the Vikings came with a 4-down front with 2 defensive ends and then 2 defensive tackles, all right? And then what this does, guys, is that it allows Pittsburgh to get creative with how they deploy their inside linebackers and their defensive backs, because they're bringing in DeShon, Elliott, and they're bringing in Jalen Ramsey, and they're bringing in Peyton Wilson, they're bringing in Patrick Queen. All of these athletes, they're moving them all around the formation, and they're kind of threatening those guys to blitz. So not only does the Vikings offense have to deal with Nick Herbig, T.J. Watt, Cam Hayward, Keanu Benson, and then their rotation of guys in those spots, but you'll also have to deal with the blitzing linebackers and the blitzing DBs that they were sending time and time again all throughout the day. Carson Wentz didn't know what hit him, and a big part of why they were able to deploy all these kind of middle-level defenders in the blitzing game was because they utilized wide 9 alignments. And if you guys aren't familiar with wide 9 alignments, it's when your outside linebackers, your most outside edge rushers are lined up extremely out wide, all right? And what this does is it gives edge rushers better pass rush angles to attack offensive tackles. So T.J. Watt, Nick Herbig, 2 guys with excellent get-off. Wide 9 alignments are excellent for them to get to the quarterback quickly. And then within the middle spaces here between the edge rushers and the defensive tackles, they would fill in with Peyton Wilson, with Patrick Queen, with DeShon Elliott, with Jalen Ramsey, these kind of versatile type of middle defenders in the second level, and they did some really creative stuff. They also did some really fun stunts. This was just an absolute feast for the Steelers pass rush in this football game. For a number of reasons. And then also they were able to kind of unlock a little bit of a cheat code to open up some one-on-one opportunities for T.J. Watt. And that cheat code is to put a blitzing linebacker or defensive back on the outside of him so that it would occupy the tight end or the running back tasked with guarding T.J. Watt. And that is just an absolutely fantastic thing that I think Mike Tomlin and Teryl Austin implemented this week, because it forces more one-on-one matchups and more one-on-one opportunities. Because it's like if you double team or chip T.J. Watt, that means Jalen Ramsey or DeShon Elliott or Patrick Queen or Peyton Wilson is going to be screaming off the edge unblocked, and that's definitely not something that you want if you are an offensive play caller like Kevin O'Connell. So like I said, guys, if you have a linebacker or a DB that's playing on the outside of T.J. Watt, you're either going to have to put another offensive player to help and chip T.J. Watt, or you're going to get a one-on-one opportunity for TJ versus the opposing team's right tackle. So they utilized that a couple of times in this game. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I would not be surprised if we see more of that in the weeks to come. And then speaking of DeShon Elliott, man, he was that kind of dynamic piece that they were deploying all over the defensive formation, specifically as a blitzer. They blitzed him 20 times this week versus the Minnesota Vikings, all right? Like, he was just being deployed everywhere, in the middle, in those kind of in-between spaces between the edge rusher and the defensive tackle, on the outside shade of T.J. Watt. They were just deploying him everywhere, whether it was against the run or whether it was against the pass. 20 total blitzes for DeShon Elliott, and honestly, the Steelers are using Elliott like I thought they would be using Ramsey this year. You guys remember the videos we made on this channel where I talked about Ramsey being a blitzing DB, all these different things? They blitzed DeShon Elliott more than Jalen Ramsey in this football game by a pretty wide margin, honestly. So, he's that dynamic piece in this defense. He makes things go, and, once I don't think it's a coincidence, guys, that you inject DeShon Elliott into this defense, and it's immediately much better, all right? Like, he is such a catalyst for defensive success here in Pittsburgh. The Steelers have him at an absolute steal with that extension that they signed him to this year. I'm so happy that he is here with us with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But, also in the safety room here, something that maybe disappointed me was we didn't see any of Jabrill Peppers in this football game. And, when I went back and watched the film and I was looking for Jabrill Peppers, I'm like, he's not playing in any of these plays. And then I kind of looked throughout the rest of the game, and he got 0 defensive snaps throughout the entire game. He played on special teams, but this is the second time in 3 weeks where he has gotten 0 defensive snaps, and this disappointed me because last week versus New England, he had an over 90 PFF grade, and I know PFF grades aren't everything, but he played really well. He had a fumble recovery and a forced fumble. He had a number of tackles. He was all over the place as a beautiful run defending, strong safety, and they completely buried him this week. They played freaking Chuck Clark and Juan Thornhill over him, and I was just a little bit disappointed by that. And my message to Mike Tomlin is you cannot bury this guy on the roster for the rest of the season, all right? Like, you just can't, all right? He's a better player than Chuck Clark. In my opinion, he's a better player than Juan Thornhill. I thought Thornhill made some nice plays this week, but Clark was once again a little bit of a mess. But Peppers is a really good freaking football player, man, and he can help you out in a lot of ways. And honestly, I was thinking about it earlier today, guys, and with Jalen Ramsey expected to be out, I would use DeShon Elliott as kind of that nickel type of player, that big nickel player, and I would play Jabrill Peppers at strong safety. That way you can have Juan Thornhill at free safety. He makes some big plays last week against Minnesota. Then you got Jabrill Peppers is a really good, strong safety that can play in coverage, that can tackle, that can run defend, and then you got DeShon Elliott is kind of that blitzing kind of piece, that dynamic piece that opposing quarterbacks have to deal with on a down-to-down basis. So I think that's a really good plan to address this Jalen Ramsey injury. We'll see how they address it in the weeks to come. They could just put Brandon Echols in the slot. That's certainly a possibility there. But if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive coordinator, I'm playing Juan Thornhill at free safety, Jabrill Peppers at full-time at strong safety, and then I'm playing DeShon Elliott in the nickel. Then we get to the linebacking core here, and I thought Patrick Queen had another really good week, and he is playing like an absolute maniac, man, particularly as a blitzer and as a run defender, all right? And, he'll have his lapses in coverage, but, man, he is getting into the backfield so consistently. He is such a smart player. He is getting everybody in the right place. He's doing a really good job as the quote-unquote quarterback of the defense, as Mike Tomlin calls it. I think he's really hitting his stride here in year 2 here in Pittsburgh, and I'm really excited to see how he's going to play the rest of the way. Then Peyton Wilson had a bounce-back week this week. He still had some lapses in coverage, as you're going to see, and he was out of position in the run game a couple of times, but I thought it was his best week of the season, and he got a full workload. Cole Holcomb, I think, only had 10 snaps in this football game. Peyton Wilson had a full 60-plus snap workload. He is back to being a 3-down player for this defense. And then, of course, kudos to him for tracking down Jordan Addison on that 81-yard busted coverage. Speaking of that busted coverage, that's another coverage bust from Darius Slay. All right, and I'm going to break this play down for you guys so you kind of know what happened here. Here is a screenshot of the play pre-snap, okay? And the Steelers are kind of playing pretty ambiguous here, all right? They've got what's called 1.5 safety technique here. We got one true deep safety, but you got one guy that's kind of playing deep but could certainly play up. You have one guy playing press on one side, and you have another corner playing off. This could be a very wide range of coverages that the Pittsburgh Steelers are playing, so it's up to Carson Wentz to determine what the Steelers are playing post-snap. And the Steelers are trying to run kind of a non-traditional Tampa 2 look here, or cover 2 look, where the safety that's playing a little bit down there, Chuck Clark, is going to be buzzing down into a hook zone, And then the expectation here is that the corner playing off coverage, Darius Slay, is going to be responsible for the deep half. But as you guys can see with this next photo here, Darius Slay doesn't do his job, and he instead goes into the curl flat, which is DeShon Elliott's responsibility, leaving the deep half on the right side of the field wide ass open for Jordan Addison to run through. Of course, Carson Wentz hits him, and then Peyton Wilson has to track him down. So this is another week. I think this is the third week out of 4 where Darius Slay has had a very major coverage bust that has led to either a very big play or a touchdown. And Darius Slay, man, as a veteran that has been around the block, there's no excuse for him to have these coverage busts. And I know he's new to the Steelers, right? He's new to the Steelers' versions of communication and playing with these players. All right, and I certainly expect him to play better and play cleaner as the season goes on. That is a reasonable expectation. But it still remains that he is a veteran piece on this defense, making mistakes very, very consistently. And these are not just kind of like small mistakes. These are big coverage busts leading to scores and leading to big plays. So Darius Slay, I think I'm being fair with him here. I think that he can be a very good player with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's shown some really good stuff on tape, but there's also way too much being out of position, all right? So he needs to tighten up. I think I'm being fair with that. I'm really a big fan of his. I want him to play well here, but we have to be honest with what the film says, and the film says that he was in the wrong on that play. And then overall, talking about the defense, guys, I love the defensive game plan this week from Mike Tomlin, all right? The Steelers' defense this week looked more like a Brian Flores defense with all the fake blitzes looks that they were doing and all the different creative stunts that they were doing and all the different stuff that they were doing in the front seven. It looked more like a Brian Flores defense than Brian Flores' defense looked like. I mean, it was an awesome game plan. I couldn't be more complimentary of what Teryl Austin and Mike Tomlin did to get this team ready to play this football game. And if this game was any indication of what this Steelers defense is going to look like this year, maybe down the stretch, we're talking about this as maybe the best defense in football, especially when Joey Porter Jr. gets back into the fold. So answer this question for me down there in the comment section. Does Mike Tomlin and Teryl Austin know what they're doing? I hear a lot of people on Steelers Twitter saying this head coach that is responsible for 2/3 of his seasons having top 10 defenses doesn't know what he's doing defensively, all right? And I think that's just kind of a ludicrous thing to say. I think, you can certainly criticize Tomlin and Austin when they don't do stuff right. We've done that on this channel. But I think if you watch the film this week versus the Minnesota Vikings, you cannot come away with that thinking that these two guys don't know how to coach defensive football. All right, so tonight it is a Monday Night Football doubleheader. We're going to be putting this out probably during the game itself. Maybe you're watching us at halftime, so thank you guys for spending your halftime with us if that's the case. But there is a very clear rooting guide if you are a Pittsburgh Steelers fan tonight, in my opinion. All right, in the first game, Jets versus Dolphins, we very clearly want the Jets to win. Not just because we like Justin Fields as a guy and we want him to get his first victory as a New York Jet, but also if the Dolphins lose, they go to 0-4 tonight, they might consider maybe even dumping their head coach, Mike McDonald, and they might consider dumping Tyreek Hill as well for maybe, let's say, a third-round pick in Pat Freiermuth. That would be absolutely terrific if that was the case. And then the reason why, of course, we're cheering for the Denver Broncos in the later game versus the Bengals is because if Denver wins, the Steelers have sole possession of first place in the AFC North. So hopefully Bo Nix and the Broncos can get the job done in Mile High tonight. That'll be it for tonight for tonight's show, guys. I know it's a bit of a longer one, so appreciate all the real ones sticking with me here to the very end. If you guys want extensive, in-depth Steelers coverage just like today, every single day here on YouTube, make sure you click that subscribe button and join the Steelers Talk family today.